I knew the day was going to be rough the second I stepped into that hotel lobby. You ever walk into a place and immediately feel like you don't belong? Like your shoes are too loud, your dress too plain, and your entire existence makes people shift uncomfortably? That was me, standing under crystal chandeliers, gripping my son's hand while pretending I wasn't absolutely dreading this. Caroline, my ex-sister-in-law, was getting married, and somehow I had convinced myself it would be okay to show up. For my son's sake. Tyler had wanted to see his dad. And I just didn't want to make things worse for him. He still believed in family. He still had hope. I didn't have the heart to take that from him. But the second we reached the reception table, I knew. The young woman scanning the guest list paused, her smile faltered, and after a hushed whisper with another staff member, we were politely escorted to our seats. Our table was off to the side, near the back, practically in another zip code from the rest of the family. And then I saw it. 2 little name cards. Mine read, single mother waitress. His? Single mother's child. Like it was some kind of charity dinner instead of a wedding. Like we were on display. I felt my stomach twist. My ears burned. Tyler read it too, he's 8, not stupid. His face went blank, but I saw his little fists ball up in his lap. And all I could think was, don't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. I flipped the cards over, pretending it was nothing. Just a bad joke, sweetheart, I whispered, even though I knew damn well it wasn't. Then Beverly arrived, in pearls and judgment, looking like she'd walked out of a high society magazine and into a villain's monologue. Oh Jennifer, you came, she said, like I was some mangy dog that wandered into her garden party. And little Tyler too, how nice. No warmth. No love for her grandson. Just that condescending smile that made me want to scream. I was hanging on by a thread. I kept reminding myself, this is for Tyler. He deserves to see his dad. He deserves to be part of the celebration, even if I have to eat every ounce of my dignity to make it happen. And then Beverly picked up the mic. She gave this long, syrupy speech about love and family and inclusion, like she was the Queen of Grace herself, and then she pivoted. Since Jennifer is such an experienced waitress, she said with a sweet-as-poison smile, perhaps she wouldn't mind helping serve dinner tonight. And I swear, the laughter that followed sounded like knives. People chuckled. Whispered, looked at me like I was part of the entertainment. I froze. My hands clenched around the napkin in my lap. Michael, my ex-husband, just sat there, sipping his drink, looking away. He didn't say a word. Not one word. But before I could even process what to do, before I could crumble or bolt or scream, Tyler stood up. His chair scraped loudly across the floor, cutting through the laughter like a blade. I turned, stunned, and saw him walk, alone, toward the stage. He was tiny. Just a kid in a little red tie. But he stepped up to that mic like he owned it. He cleared his throat and said, please stop making fun of my mom. And the room went silent. Everyone stared. My heart slammed in my chest. And then he said he had a gift for the bride. That's when everything changed. That morning started off like any other, but I could already feel something was off. You know those mornings where the light feels too sharp, your breath feels too heavy, and your chest just tight? I stood by the kitchen window, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee while Tyler fiddled with his cereal. Our apartment was quiet, too quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional clink of spoon against bowl. It wasn't much of a place, a little one-bedroom walk-up in South Boston with creaky floors and windows that didn't quite seal. But it was ours. I'd built a life here. Scraped it together out of heartbreak, tips, and stubborn pride. I should have been mentally prepping for Caroline's wedding, fake a smile. Survive the stairs, don't cry in the bathroom kind of deal, but all I could do was stare at my reflection in the window and wonder how the hell I got here. I hadn't asked for any of this. I didn't ask to be cheated on, lied to, discarded like I was some dirty napkin. But Michael had made his choice. 3 years ago, he packed up, said, "I want a divorce," and left like I was an inconvenience, not his wife, not Tyler's mother, just something he'd outgrown. And somehow, his family acted like I was the problem. Like I was the embarrassment. Still, I didn't cry. Not that day. Not the day he left. Not even when I had to move back in with my parents for 6 months and take on back-to-back double shifts at Maple Diner just to afford rent again. I kept going. For Tyler. Always for Tyler. "Mom, I can't tie my tie." His voice broke through my spiral. I turned to see him in the living room, standing in front of the mirror, tongue peeking out in concentration as his little hands wrestled with that bright red tie. My heart clenched. God, he looked so grown up. I set my coffee down and knelt in front of him, fixing the knot with practiced fingers. "This part's always tricky," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "But don't worry. Mom's got you." He looked up at me, his eyes way too wise for an 8-year-old. I could tell he knew I didn't want to go. He could feel it in my touch, in the silence, in the stiffness of my smile. He always could. "It's okay, Mom," he said softly. "We don't have to go." And for a second, I considered it. Just staying home. Making pancakes. Watching movies. Letting the day pass without walking into a room full of people who pretended I didn't exist when I was married and would now look at me like I was a cautionary tale. But then I looked at him again. And I remembered the look on his face when the invitation came, how hopeful he'd been. "Maybe I'll get to see Dad." And just like that, I pushed the dread down and smiled. "No, sweetheart. Today's a special day. We're going to be extra polite, okay?" Tyler didn't respond. He just nodded, lips pressed together, that little wrinkle forming between his brows. He knew. But he didn't press it. I slipped into my navy blue dress, plain, safe, something that wouldn't draw attention, and stood in front of the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because she looked bad, just tired. Worn thin. Like life had taken a cheese grater to my spirit and left just enough to keep going. But I squared my shoulders, put on some lip gloss, and told myself it would be fine. We'd go, sit quietly, smile politely, and leave before dessert. I could endure a few fake smiles. For Tyler. Always for Tyler. We stepped out into the morning air, and I held his hand just a little tighter than usual. He didn't say anything about it. He just squeezed back. And that's how we walked straight into the storm. 3 years ago, I thought I still had a marriage. A flawed one, sure. Michael had gotten distant, distracted, but I was busy too. Working doubles at Maple Diner. Managing Tyler's tantrums, homework, lunches, laundry. It's easy to lose connection when life turns into survival mode. I thought we were just tired. I thought we'd bounce back. I didn't know I was being replaced. The truth hit me like a sucker punch. It wasn't some dramatic discovery, I didn't catch them together. No text messages. No lipstick on collars. He just came home one evening, sat down at the kitchen table like it was nothing, and said, "I want a divorce." Just like that. No preamble. No remorse. Like he was canceling a gym membership. And then he added, "I've been seeing someone else. I'm moving in with her." Her. A girl 10 years younger than us. His secretary. Of course, I didn't throw anything. I didn't scream. I just stared at him. My hands were shaking, but I wouldn't let the tears fall. Not in front of him. He didn't deserve to see me break. I waited until he left. Packed up a bag, tucked Tyler into the car, and drove to my parents' house in silence. My mother didn't say much when I showed up on her doorstep. She just opened the door, took one look at my face, and let me in. Those first few weeks were a blur. Grief mixed with exhaustion. Tyler was only 5, and he didn't really understand what was going on. Just that Dad wasn't around and Mom cried in the shower a lot. He'd crawl into my bed at night and hold my arm like he thought I might float away. I told him it would be okay. I lied. But I kept going. I went back to full-time shifts at the diner. I took the early morning buses, dropped Tyler off at preschool, burned my feet on greasy kitchen tiles, and tried not to fall apart. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Rent was due. Tyler needed me. So I worked, and smiled, and nodded politely even when customers left pennies for tips or snapped their fingers at me like I was subhuman. Michael? He moved on like I'd never existed. Didn't call. Didn't check on his son. He sent court-ordered child support, and that was it. No birthday visits. No weekend trips. Just silence. His family made things worse. Beverly, his mother, had always looked at me like I was a coffee stain on her white linen life. But once the divorce was official, she stopped pretending. Michael made a mistake marrying someone like you, she told me, flat out, at a 4th of July barbecue. You were never one of us. The worst part? She said it in front of Tyler. He was coloring on the porch steps, and I saw the way his crayon paused mid-line. Caroline was no better. Every time she opened her mouth it was some backhanded insult disguised as advice. Maybe if you had a real education, you wouldn't have to work weekends, she'd say with that fake smile. But I suppose waitressing is noble in its own way. She had a master's degree and reminded everyone of it every chance she got. Tyler noticed. He didn't say much. But one night, curled up next to me in bed, he whispered, Grandma Beverly and Aunt Caroline don't like you, do they? I kissed his forehead and gave the safest answer I could. Adult relationships are complicated, baby. But inside, I was raging. They made me feel like I was less than. Like I was disposable. Like my life, my work, my love for my child meant nothing because I didn't wear pearls or have a diploma on the wall. But I held on. For Tyler. Always for Tyler. People talk about strength like it's loud. Like it means kicking down doors or setting things on fire. But that's not the kind of strength I had. Mine was quieter. It was waking up at 4:45 a.m. every single day so I could make Tyler's lunch, brush the tangles out of his hair, and still make it to Maple Diner by 6 o'clock. It was smiling at customers who called me hon like I was furniture and leaving shifts with aching feet and a fake grin just so Tyler wouldn't know how wrecked I really was. Strength was telling my 5-year-old that we couldn't afford the new action figure he wanted, not because he wasn't worth it, but because rent came first and I hadn't had a day off in 2 weeks. And still making pancakes with a smile that Saturday morning, like everything was fine. I worked double shifts when they were short-staffed, said yes to every holiday nobody else wanted, and stayed late mopping up spilled soup without complaining. My uniform smelled like grease and coffee most days, but I kept it clean. Kept myself presentable. Because if I let even one thing slip, I felt like I'd start unraveling, and once you start, it's hard to stop. I never told anyone how tired I was. Not my coworkers. Not my parents. Not even myself, really. I just kept moving. Kept breathing. Kept packing lunchboxes and counting change and signing Tyler's reading logs with a little heart next to my name. And I loved him so much it hurt. I loved him with every scraped knuckle, every skipped meal, every late bus ride and discount coupon. I kept the weight of the world on my back so he wouldn't have to carry any of it. When he asked why his dad didn't call, I said maybe he was busy. When he said Beverly didn't smile at him the way she smiled at Caroline's kids, I told him she was just old and tired. He never saw me cry. I saved that for the shower. Or the bathroom at the end of a shift, door locked, face buried in a wad of scratchy paper towels. There was a pride in not breaking. In being the reliable one. The invisible one who held everything together. But I won't lie, some days the resentment sat in my throat like a stone. Watching Caroline live like a goddess while I counted pennies for gas. Watching Michael post vacation photos with some new girl while I scrubbed dried ketchup off a laminated menu. Hearing people joke about those kinds of women who raise kids alone, like I was some cautionary tale instead of a human being doing her absolute best, but I kept quiet. People like Beverly wanted me to snap, to make a scene, to prove their low expectations right. I never gave them the satisfaction. I nodded. I smiled. I swallowed every insult like bitter medicine. Because I knew who I was. I knew what I was doing for Tyler. And I knew the day would come when that quiet strength would matter more than their judgment ever could. I thought after the wedding fiasco, they'd try to bury it. Sweep it under the rug like they did everything else, pretend it didn't happen, spin the story into something more palatable for their country club circles. But no. What happened at that hotel went viral in our little town faster than you could say single mother waitress. And for once, I wasn't the punchline. People talked. A lot. About Tyler. About the recording. About how a little boy stood up to an entire room of grown adults who should have known better. They whispered about Caroline and Michael, about the pregnancy, about the betrayal that turned a wedding into a scandal no one would forget. Beverly tried to save face. Of course, issued some polite half-apology wrapped in pearls and bitterness, but the damage was done. Her reputation? Torched. Her social standing? Shaky at best, and me? I went back to work. The Monday after, I walked into Maple Diner like I always did, apron tied, hair pulled back, heart still beating out of habit more than hope. I figured I'd keep my head down and wait for the whispers to die off. But Mr. Hartman, my boss, called me into his office before I could even clock in. Thought maybe I was getting fired for bringing drama to his establishment. Instead, he leaned back in his creaky chair and said, "Jennifer, I've been watching you bust your tail here for over a decade. You've never once asked for anything. It's time someone saw you." Then he handed me a new name tag, Deputy Manager. I swear, for a second, I forgot how to breathe. I didn't cry, not there. I waited until I was alone in the back storage room and let the tears fall quietly between cans of tomato soup and cartons of napkins. It wasn't just a job title. It was someone finally seeing me. Not as Michael's ex. Not as a waitress. But as someone who mattered. Customers came in that week just to say they'd heard what happened. One woman squeezed my hand and said, "You raised that boy right." Another told me Tyler had more guts than half the men she knew. I kept hearing the same words over and over, "You deserved better. You deserve more." For once, the world agreed. Meanwhile, things weren't going so well on the other side of the story. Michael's company didn't exactly appreciate being dragged into a public scandal. I don't know if he was fired or quietly let go, but let's just say he stopped posting beach selfies and started updating his LinkedIn real quick. His golden boy image? Gone. Just like that. Karma didn't even knock, it kicked the damn door in. Caroline packed up and moved 2 towns over. Word is she's raising the baby alone. James? He never looked back. And I heard his family cut all ties with the Westons after that night. I'd say I felt bad, but I don't. She orchestrated my public humiliation. She made my son cry. She got what she gave. And Beverly? Oh, Beverly. The woman who used to host elaborate teas and charity galas couldn't get a table at the local country club anymore. Her name, once whispered with envy, now passed around like cautionary gossip. I got a letter from her a few months later. Apologizing. Admitting she was wrong. I read it. Twice. Then I wrote back, "I can let the past go, but that doesn't mean I'll ever forget." I didn't send it to punish her. I sent it because I meant it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Done being small. Done being ashamed. Done letting people like them tell me who I am. Starting school again at 36 wasn't part of my life plan, but then again, neither was any of this. One day, I was wiping down ketchup-streaked booths at Maple Diner, and the next I was sitting in a plastic chair in the back row of a community college classroom, clutching a brand new notebook like it was armor. I hadn't stepped foot in a classroom in over a decade. My stomach was in knots. Everyone else looked younger, more confident, like they belonged there. I felt like a fraud. But I also felt something else I hadn't felt in a long time: possibility, nutrition. That was the subject I picked. Not because it sounded fancy or easy, but because I had spent years making the most out of food stamps, bulk groceries, and leftover diner scraps. I figured if I could make a week's worth of meals out of 3 cans of beans and half a rotisserie chicken, maybe I had something worth learning and teaching. Maybe there was power in that. Tyler was proud. Beyond proud. Every evening after I got off my shift, I'd head to class while he stayed with our neighbor Miss Clara, who treated him like her own grandkid. I'd come home exhausted, brain fried, feet sore, but he'd be at the table waiting for me with a snack and questions. "What did you learn today, Mom?" He'd ask like I was the one in 2nd grade. And sometimes, I'd tell him. Sometimes, I'd fall asleep on the couch mid-sentence. "And Tyler?" He bloomed. It's like something in him clicked after the wedding. Like he saw what it meant to speak up and suddenly realized his voice mattered. He started raising his hand more in class. Started walking a little taller. One afternoon he came home waving a certificate over his head, grinning from ear to ear. "I won the class debate," he shouted, nearly tripping over his backpack. The topic was standing up for what's right, and I won, Mom. I just stood there, holding the paper, stunned. Not because I didn't believe he could do it, but because this was the same kid who used to keep his head down in every room just to avoid being noticed. Now he was leading. Now he was using that voice that had once shattered a wedding like a bomb and turning it into something beautiful. Later that night, we were eating mac and cheese at the kitchen table, cheap, boxed, but still our comfort food, when Tyler looked up and said, "Mom, could you ever, own a restaurant?" I blinked. "A restaurant?" He nodded, all serious. "Yeah. I mean, you're always talking about food. You help fix recipes at work. You're learning nutrition now. You'd be awesome at it." I laughed at first. Not because it was silly, but because the idea felt so big. So far from where we'd started. But then I looked at him, really looked at him, and something in my chest cracked open. This wasn't just a kid dreaming. This was a kid who believed in me. So I leaned across the table, ruffled his hair, and said, "You know what? I could." And I just took the first step. He grinned like I'd told him we'd won the lottery. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was becoming. I was building something that looked a whole lot like a future. A few months after everything, a letter showed up in my mailbox. Fancy envelope. Expensive stationery. I didn't even need to open it to know who it was from: Beverly. Her handwriting was sharp and elegant, just like her tone used to be. I sat at the kitchen table, let the paper sit in my hands for a while before I finally unfolded it. She apologized. Said she had been wrong about me, about everything. Said she didn't expect forgiveness, just wanted me to know she was sorry. For the record, I believe she meant it. Maybe shame forced her hand, maybe she realized how deeply she'd failed as a grandmother and a human being. Either way, I wrote her back, "I can let the past go, but I will never forget." That was enough for me. That night, Tyler and I curled up on the couch. Popcorn in a big mixing bowl between us, one of his favorite old Disney movies playing on the TV. He leaned his head against my shoulder halfway through, and I just sat there, running my fingers through his hair, feeling him breathe. The apartment was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that comes from emptiness. It was peaceful. Whole. Safe. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was bracing for the next blow. I didn't feel like I had to shrink or explain or prove anything to anyone. I'd survived heartbreak, betrayal, humiliation. And I came out of it with my dignity, my son's love, and a dream I was finally brave enough to chase. The world hadn't crushed me. It had sharpened me. This was no longer about Michael or Caroline or Beverly. It was about us. Me and Tyler. And whatever came next, we'd face it together, without fear. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that quiet strength is still strength. You don't have to scream to be powerful. Sometimes just standing your ground, choosing kindness when you're surrounded by cruelty, and holding your head high is enough. I spent so long thinking survival was the goal, but it's not. Living is. And dreaming. And growing. So here's my advice, don't ever let someone else define your worth, and don't be afraid to start over. What would you do if you stopped surviving and started living? Who would you become? Thanks for listening to my story. Truly. It means more than you know.